Now, look carefully at the music in the classical era, a stylistic overview. Elements of classical style. First, we usually talk about the classical era starting in 1750 and ending around 1800, 1810, 1820, depending on who you are talking about. It doesn't really matter because all periods that we saw with Handel and Bach have an overlap. So we'll see that with the classical period as well, particularly towards the end. We get the emergence of genuine homophony, a very real sense of melody on the top and an accompaniment underneath it. And melody is very prominent in classical music. If you think about it, a person can sing a melody. You don't even have to be trained musically to do a melody. But to do polyphony, you have to have some training, at least in the style of Western classical music. So the homophony is a more natural way of expressing music. We get a lot of obligato accompaniments. We saw these a bit in Bach. They're going to be much simpler now. We'll talk about why later. We get a periodic phrase structure. This is so important. We get 4 measure phrases. And then out of the 4 measures and the 4 measures, I'm doing it backwards. Anyway, they make 8. And it's a question. It's a question for you, answer. So we get very organized and very precise blocks. And this is what I meant about the natural kind of being artificial. The idea was that 4 measure phrases were natural. And they were the best, therefore. But if you think about it, why 4? So anyway, because it's a question and answer, it's balance and symmetry. Harmonic rhythm slows tremendously in the classical period. If you think about some of the Bach pieces we listened to where the harmony changed every 8th note, in the classical period, you may stay on one harmony for a measure or 2. So I will demonstrate this more in class in detail. We have an illusion of order in the classical period. That's why I started the whole semester with sonata form. The surface is very predictable, very stable, you know where you are, what's going on. Underneath, it may be a different thing, but on top, at least we know where it's going on. And while we are going for regularity and periodic phrase structure, there will be a lot of irregularity, which therefore brings humor and irony. So when Mozart chooses not to write in a 4 measure phrase, it means something. It's not just an accident. You're supposed to get something out of that. Hallmarks, form and style in the mid-18th century. We see the aspects of the classical period coming about as early as the 1720s. Now think about that. Bach didn't die until 1750 and Handel until 1758. So to see elements of classical style in the 1720s means that it's something that emerges. It doesn't just say, oh, January 1st, 1750, we have classical style. And we start seeing these elements coming about in the 1720s. One of the most important innovations of the classical period is sonata form. Composers still write in sonata form, so obviously it must be an aesthetically pleasing form. We see organization all across the board. This can be in the number of movements, the style of movements, etc. We'll talk about this more in chapter 12. We talked about sonata form. We'll review that again in a separate lecture or separate online thing. And modulation. By the 1760s, composers have sonata form worked out. And most composers use it for the first movements and many slow movements and some finales. Excuse me. If I were good with iVideo, I'd know how to edit that out, but I'm not. The last thing that the chapter talks about with form and style in the 18th century is the fantasia, which is like their permission to not follow the form. Think about that. In order to not follow the form that every other piece follows, you have to have a special title for it. And this is your chance to be creative and wax rhapsodic. Now let's stop this, see if I can get it recorded, and we'll go on to the next.